Most people think they're stuck because they don't have enough resources, not enough time, not enough money, not enough support. But the real reason most people feel overwhelmed is much simpler and harder to admit. They don't have clarity, and without clarity, life feels chaotic. Even when the opportunity is right in front of you, clarity is what turns noise into signal. When you don't know what you're aiming for, every option feels equally important, every distraction feels urgent, and every setback feels personal. Your brain is constantly switching context, burning energy, and creating the illusion of progress while you stay in the same place. That's not a motivation problem, that's a clarity problem. Think about how the mind works. The brain is a prediction machine. It's designed to conserve energy by automating decisions. When you're clear about what matters, your brain starts filtering information automatically. You notice opportunities aligned with your goals. You ignore things that don't serve you. But when you're unclear, your brain has no filter. Everything comes through. That's why people without a plan feel busy but unproductive. They're not lazy, they're cognitively overloaded. Clarity creates control because it collapses complexity. Instead of managing 100 competing priorities, you define a few non-negotiables. You decide in advance what you say yes to, and more importantly, what you say no to. This is where real power shows up, not in doing more, but in doing less on purpose. Philosophically, this is about agency. If you don't consciously choose your direction, you default to other people's priorities. You live inside expectations, trends, and circumstances instead of intention. That's how years pass quickly and quietly. Not because time moves fast, but because you weren't directing it. A clear plan is an act of self-respect. It's you saying, my life is not accidental. Clarity also removes emotional friction. When your direction is vague, every decision feels heavy. You second guess yourself, you hesitate, you overthink, but when your direction is clear, decisions get lighter. You stop asking, is this good? And start asking, does this move me forward? That shift alone reduces stress more than any productivity hack ever will. A lot of people avoid clarity because it feels restrictive. They're afraid that choosing one path means losing all the others. But the opposite is true. Lack of clarity is what traps you. Commitment creates freedom because it gives your effort a direction. Water that spreads everywhere has no power. Water that's channeled moves mountains. Here's the uncomfortable part. Clarity requires honesty. You can't create a real plan if you're not willing to confront where you are and where you're not. It forces you to separate fantasy from intention. Wanting a better life is easy. Defining what that actually means and what you're willing to give up to get it is where most people stop. That's why clarity feels confronting. It exposes gaps between who you are today and who you say you want to become. But once you face that gap, something shifts. You stop living reactively. You stop waking up asking, what do I feel like doing today? And start asking, what does the plan require today? That's when control enters the picture. Not control over outcomes, but control over direction. And direction is what compounds. Clarity doesn't mean your plan will be perfect. It means it's intentional. You're allowed to adjust, refine, and evolve. But you can't correct a path you never chose. Movement with direction beats motion without meaning every time. As you think about 2026, understand this. Hope is not a strategy. Motivation is not a strategy. Even talent is not a strategy. Clarity is. Because once you're clear, everything else, discipline, time management, identity, has something to attach to. Here's the line to sit with. If you don't define your direction, you'll spend another year reacting to a life you never chose. Once you're clear about where you're going, something uncomfortable happens. The excitement wears off. The vision that felt so powerful on paper meets real life, busy days, low energy, self-doubt, and distractions that don't announce themselves as problems. This is where most plans fail. Not because the goal was wrong, but because people expect motivation to carry them all the way through. It won't. Discipline has to take over. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Discipline is not a personality trait. It's not something you're born with or without. It's a skill. And like any skill, it's built through repetition, not inspiration. We've been sold the idea that successful people wake up feeling ready. They don't. They wake up and decide over and over again. Psychologically, your brain is wired to avoid discomfort. It seeks safety, familiarity, and short-term relief. That's why you know what to do but don't always do it. That gap between knowledge and action isn't a character flaw. It's biology. Discipline is how you override that wiring. It's the bridge between intention and reality. This is where small actions matter more than big promises. Your nervous system responds to proof, not plans. Every time you follow through on a small commitment, making the call, starting the workout, opening the document, you send a signal to your brain, I am someone who acts. That identity shift is powerful. You don't build discipline by thinking about being disciplined. You build it by doing the thing you said you would do, especially when you don't feel like it. A lot of people confuse discipline with punishment. They think it's about being hard on yourself, forcing productivity, or eliminating all pleasure. That's not discipline. That's burnout. Real discipline is self-leadership. It's choosing what serves you now over what soothes you in the moment. It's an act of self-trust. And here's where philosophy comes in. Discipline is freedom. When you don't have it, your mood controls your behavior. Your circumstances control your schedule. Your impulses control your future. But when you build discipline, you reclaim choice. You stop being at the mercy of how you feel. You become the kind of person who can be relied on by others, but more importantly, by yourself. Think about how empowering that is. When you know you'll follow through, anxiety decreases. Procrastination loses its grip. You stop negotiating with yourself all day. Life gets quieter because decisions are already made. That's what discipline does. It reduces mental noise. Mel Robbins often talks about the moment of activation, the instant when you feel resistance and act anyway. That moment matters more than the result, because every time you move through resistance, you weaken its hold on you. You're not waiting to feel confident. You're creating confidence through action. This is why discipline beats motivation every time. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation asks, do I feel like it? Discipline says, this is who I am. And identity-based action compounds fast. As 2026 approaches, understand this. Your plan doesn't need perfection. It needs consistency. You don't need to change everything. You need to stop breaking promises to yourself. Start with one action, one habit, one decision you follow through on daily. Because the life you want isn't built on the days you feel inspired. It's built on the days you show up anyway. And here's the thought to carry with you. Discipline isn't about forcing your future. It's about proving to yourself that you can be trusted to create it. Once discipline becomes part of how you operate, something else comes into focus: time. Not in an abstract way, but in a deeply personal one. You start to notice how little of it you actually control when you don't decide in advance how it will be used. Most people think they're bad at time management, but that's not the real issue. The issue is that time is being spent reactively instead of intentionally. Psychologically, the human brain is drawn to urgency. Notifications, messages, other people's problems, they all trigger a sense of importance. Your nervous system responds as if something critical is happening, even when it's not. That's why you can lose hours to things that don't move your life forward and still feel exhausted at the end of the day. You weren't lazy, you were hijacked. Time is your most valuable currency, because it's the one resource you can't earn back. Money can be recovered, energy can be restored, opportunities can reappear. Time only moves in one direction, and yet most people treat it as if it's unlimited. They say yes by default. They postpone the meaningful work. They assume they'll get serious later. Later is the most expensive word you can use when you dawn. Plan your time, you live in reaction mode. Your day becomes a series of responses instead of deliberate actions. Someone else's agenda becomes your priority. That's not a productivity issue. It's a boundary issue. And boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about protecting what matters. Here's the shift that changes everything. You don't find time, you decide what deserves time. That decision requires clarity and discipline, which is why these ideas build on each other. Once you know your direction and you've built the muscle of follow through, time stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like a tool. Mel Robbins talks often about taking control of the moment you're in. Time management starts there, in the small choices. Do I open this app? Do I respond right now? Do I start the thing I've been avoiding? Every choice either compounds or costs you. And most of the cost is invisible in the moment. It shows up months later as regret, stress, or the quiet frustration of unrealized potential. Philosophically, how you spend your time is how you spend your life. There is no separation. Your calendar is a reflection of your values, not your intentions. You can say health matters, but if there's no time for movement, it's just a belief. You can say growth matters, but if learning is always postponed, it's just an idea. Time tells the truth. This is why eliminating distractions isn't about willpower, it's about design. If your environment constantly pulls you away from what matters, you will lose that fight every time. Designing your day, blocking time, reducing inputs, creating space for focus is an act of self-respect. You're acknowledging that your attention is limited and valuable. There's also a deeper emotional layer here. When people waste time, it's often because they're avoiding something: uncertainty, discomfort, the fear of not being good enough. Busyness becomes a shield. Distraction becomes a coping mechanism. But avoidance doesn't make fear disappear, it just delays growth. When you plan your time, you remove the hiding places, you face the work that actually matters. And yes, that can be uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly freeing, because once you do, momentum builds, progress becomes visible, and visible progress fuels confidence. As 2026 approaches, don't ask yourself how to get more time. Ask yourself where your time is currently leaking and why. Awareness alone can change behavior. Decision turns awareness into action. Sit with this thought. If you don't decide how your time will be spent, you'll look back and realize it was spent for you. Once you understand how to manage your time, something even deeper comes into view: who you believe you are. Because at the end of the day, your habits, your schedule, your follow-through, they're not just behaviors, they're expressions of identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of the person you see yourself as. Most people try to change outcomes without changing identity. They say, I want to be more confident, I want to be successful, I want to be consistent, but they continue to think, act, and decide like the same version of themselves. That internal mismatch is exhausting. And it's why so many people feel like they're pushing uphill. Psychologically, your brain works to keep your identity stable. Whatever you repeatedly do becomes familiar. Familiar becomes safe. Safe becomes who I am. This is why change feels uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, but because it threatens the story you've been telling yourself. Discipline and planning only stick when they align with identity. Here's the shift that matters. Stop asking what you want and start asking who you're becoming. The future you isn't created by big moments. It's created by the decisions you make when no one is watching. The way you speak to yourself, the standards you tolerate, the excuses you stop believing. Mel Robbins often emphasizes that confidence is built after action, not before it. Identity works the same way. You don't wait until you feel like a disciplined person to act disciplined. You act disciplined and your identity catches up. Every time you do the hard thing, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. This is where people get stuck. They think identity is fixed. It's not. It's constructed slowly, quietly, through repetition. You are not your past. You are not your habits from last year. You are the result of what you consistently reinforce. And that's incredibly empowering. Philosophically, this is about responsibility. Not blame, responsibility, the ability to respond. When you upgrade your identity, you stop outsourcing responsibility to circumstances, motivation, or luck. You stop saying, that's just how I am. You start saying, that's no longer who I choose to be. This doesn't mean perfection. It means standards. Standards for how you show up when things are inconvenient. Standards for how you manage your energy. Standards for how you speak to yourself when you fall short. Identity is revealed most clearly in moments of friction. And here's something most people overlook: your plan must be designed for the future version of you, not the current one. If you keep making plans that assume the same habits, the same reactions, the same limits, you'll keep getting the same results. Growth requires an identity gap, a stretch. Ask yourself this: what would the version of me who already succeeded do today? How would they handle this moment? That question alone can change behavior instantly. It pulls you forward instead of keeping you anchored to the past. There's also freedom in letting go of old labels. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad with money. I always quit. Those aren't facts. They're stories reinforced by repetition, and stories can be rewritten, but only if you stop rehearsing them. As 2026 approaches, don't just set goals. Decide who you are becoming. Decide the standards you will live by. Decide the identity you will protect even when it's inconvenient. Because once identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. Sit with this final thought. Your future isn't waiting for more effort. It's waiting for you to become the person who no longer negotiates with the life they want.